podcast is called An Eternity of Basketball. That's a joke cantada line. So,
Okay.
we want to go reminisce, do some nostalgia and everything about how it was back then in the PBA.
I've been watching Joe a lot lately.
Yeah, they've been showing the games on the
Big
signal.
Rush.
So, yeah, and that's great because people are talking about it now. There's a lot of time to watch. So we will jump right into it, Coach. I'm gonna hit you with question number one right away.
Okay.
My question is, because you played in what we call the greatest era of imports, 80s and 90s, and so I'll ask you right away, who are the best imports you played against, defensively, offensively?
The best imports?
Yes.
Well, when I first came to the Philippines, the majority of the imports that were there in 1981, or here in 1981, 1982, 1983, these were probably the best players playing in the Continental League. There was one point where I think we probably had 7 out of the top 10 scorers in the Continental League were actually playing here in the Philippines. So the Philippines was one of the few places that we could actually go and play professional basketball if we weren't playing in the NBA or if we weren't playing in the CBA. So it was good opportunities for us here in the Philippines. When I first arrived, I guess the best players I went up against were Al Green. Al Green played for Crispa. He was a left-handed player. He's only 6'1", but he was very, very strong, very athletic. And he averaged about 25, 26 points a game in the Continental League. Lou Massey, who we call Machine Gun, because he was pretty much unstoppable. His defense wasn't that great, but his offense was off the charts. I mean, either myself or anybody else could stop him from scoring. And he was one of the top players coming out of, I think, North Carolina, Charlotte, where he went to school. And he came in here and he just set the league on fire with his shooting. Of course, Russell Murray, who was the best import in 1981, was a very, very good player. And there were others that were very good also.
But if you were to say who was the best import offensively that you faced and defensively as well?
The best import player, period, for me, and it's only my opinion, was Billy Ray Bates. It's not that he did it that much better than everybody else, but he just did it very, very well, and he did it with a flair. And I had a long history with Billy. We played against each other a lot in the States. I knew him before we arrived here, and I had a lot of respect for him because in the CBA and the summer leagues in the East Coast, we went up against one another and we had some battles. And he should have been a star professional player in the NBA, if you ask me. That's how talented he was, but he did have some off-the-court problems he had to solve, which he had a lot of problems solving. And
yes.
Billy was the type of player, I always tell this story. He was the type of player that I could go to sleep at 11 o'clock, prepare myself for the game, eat well. Billy probably could stay out to 3 in the morning and still come in and score 60 points. That's how good he was. I mean, he was just a great player offensively, and he could lock you up defensively too. I remember there was one time that in 83, we were out in the Solaris Hotel. You guys remember the Solaris Hotel?
Solaris Hotel, yes.
Yes, down Boulevard. And we had a disco there called Stargazer. Stargazer.
Yes.
You guys might be a little bit too young for this, but
no, that's
Noel used to go there.
Yeah, that's the one with the elevator that you can see the whole Ross Boulevard.
That's correct. Yeah, you got
it.
One night we were in there, and it was about 7 of us. All 7 of the 10 imports were there, and we were all talking and drinking beer and having a good time. And Billy's just going off on all the imports, talking about, hey, I'll score on you, I'll dunk on you, I'll get 50 on you. And then he got to me, and I just said, Billy, hold up, stop it already, because I can't stop you, but you certainly can't stop me. So let's call it speed. Let's call it neutral, okay? So he left me alone that night, but he got on everybody else. And, I mean, he was just a spectacular player. For me, he probably was the best import ever to play while I was here. And, of course, there were others that were really great. I mean, you're talking about Bobby Ray Parks, who I actually recruited here in the Philippines, who went on to win 7 Best Import Awards. Michael Hackett, Michael Young, David Thurkill. There's some guys who didn't stay that long, but were also very, very good players like Carlos Briggs, Dexter Schaus, Michael Young. I might have mentioned Michael's name already, but Michael Young.
Jose Slaughter.
There were guys that were here when I first arrived that were really great players. Larry McNeil, Andy Fields, I mean,
Right.
he's some of the guys that don't really get noticed too much. Probably the guy that went under the radar for me, who was just totally unstoppable in the States, was Jackie Dorsey. You guys might not remember Jackie Dorsey, but he was pretty much unstoppable. He led the CBA in scoring and rebounding.
For Gilby's, right?
That's correct. So there were some great players during that time, and I think it was because we didn't really have that many opportunities to play overseas. I mean, the jobs in Italy and France and some of the bigger countries who had basketball leagues at that time, they were recruiting the ex-NBA players, the guys who were retiring, and then they would go overseas and play over in Europe. But for us, the Philippines was one of the major places we could go. The Philippines and Australia were two of the leagues that we could go and play right away and gave us a good opportunity to, further our careers and earn money outside of the CBA or outside of the NBA.
I think Noel wants to jump right into your first stint in the Philippines. Noel.
Well, you weren't supposed to play for Teflon. You're supposed to play for Great Taste. So what happened? Could you tell us about what could have happened if you had joined Great Taste in '81? You would have won a championship right off the bat. Yeah,
Great Taste had a pretty good team. That's why when they decided, I think they got Lou Massey instead of me, I believe.
Yes.
They had a good team that year in '81. This is the story. I played for the Detroit Pistons in the LA Summer League. We were out there for about 1 month training and playing in the league. And we get to the last game. I'm not really playing that much. I'm only playing about 15 minutes a game. Not really scoring that much, maybe 4 or 5 points a game. I had an opportunity to go back with the Pistons to veterans camp, but they wouldn't guarantee me any money. So that was giving me problems because, it's hard to go back and go through the entire camp like I did the year before with the Bullets. And then at the end of the camp, 2 days before the season started, I got taken out of the team. So and then you're left to go back in the CBA once again. So I wasn't really feeling that, to be quite honest with you. So after our last game in the Summer League with the Pistons, with the Detroit Pistons, this is where all the NBA teams would send their teams during the summer. It wasn't an official league like it is now in Vegas, but they still had a league where all the NBA teams used to participate. After my last game, it's over. I'm getting ready to head back to Baltimore, where I'm from. And all of a sudden, a guy walks up to me on the court, as I'm walking off the court, and asks me if I want to play in the Philippines. And for some reason, my first instinct was, no, I don't want to play in the Philippines. I want to play for the Detroit Pistons. That's why I'm here. And it turned out it was Jimmy Mariano, who just approached me right after the game and asked me if I wanted to play there. And I told him no, I didn't really want to play there, but I would keep it open. I keep open mind about it. And I went home. Like I tell this story, I looked it up in the encyclopedia of the Philippines, found out where it was, found out there was warm weather, found out that there were bases here. So there were English-speaking people here also. Almost all the Filipinos spoke English. And I played a short stint in Venezuela, where we won a championship with the national team in Venezuela and with the U.S. national team, where I was a member of the team. And nobody spoke English there. So when I found out everybody spoke English in the Philippines, I was like, oh, yeah, maybe it might be nice to go there, because in Venezuela, I couldn't speak to anybody. I couldn't communicate with anybody. So it wasn't exactly – it was a great experience on the court, but not off the court, because I just couldn't communicate with people up in Valencia, Venezuela. So I go home, I study it, I look in the encyclopedia, I said, maybe this is a good opportunity. I talked to the head coach of the Detroit Pistons, and they told me that they were going to invite me back to camp, but they weren't going to guarantee me any money. The amount they were going to guarantee me was very, very small. So I said to myself, why don't you just do the same thing you did the last year, and then just go to play in the Philippines for 4 months, which is what they were offering, and then go back to the CBA and try to get back to the NBA again like you did last year. At least you'll have some money in your pocket this time after playing in the Philippines. My problem was when I called Jimmy Mariano to tell him I was interested, he told me he had already gotten Lou Massey. As you know how that turned out. He ended up being great. I said, okay. Well, it was an offer, but it's no longer there. So I'll just prepare myself for veterans camp and go back to veterans camp with the Detroit Pistons. And maybe about 4 or 5 days later, I got a call from the manager of the Teflon team, Frank Hahn, and he asked me if I could play for Teflon. And I took advantage of the opportunity. I said yes, and that's how I arrived in the Philippines.
And then, of course, one of the assistant coaches of Teflon was actually future Commissioner June Bernardino. how your relationship started out with that, and probably that indirectly also got you into broadcasting after your days as an import were over.
I credit June Bernardino with teaching me how to be a Filipino. That's what I credit him for. When I first arrived, the first thing he did was I spent almost every evening at his house. I ate dinner at his house. I ate dinner with his family. He had a young family at that time. And
that's near Charlie's place.
He was the one who would take me around and tell me the best restaurants to go to. And he really taught me how to be a Filipino. I mean, normally an American, if you go to someone's house and they ask you to eat and you don't like the food, you don't eat. It's as simple as that. You beg off or whatever. But he taught me that in the Philippines, you can't do that. If the Filipinos offer you the hospitality to feed you, you have to eat their food. Even if it's not familiar to you, even if you don't like it, you still have to eat it. So find the best thing that you can eat and just eat, okay? Otherwise, if you offend it, you get assaulted. And so I learned a lot of things from him right from the very, very beginning. And
that's the reason they call the Philippine Cup the June Bernardino Trophy, right? When you win it 3 times, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, he was really an ambassador for the league. That's why he went on to be the commissioner of the league.
Great. So if you had joined Great Taste, because Sid is a Great Taste fan. So if you had joined Great Taste, he would have gotten his championships earlier than
Manny Victorino, Cho Season. That was a loaded team.
Well, disclaimer, I was a Toyota fan first before I became a Great Taste fan. When Toyota disbanded, that's the only time I shifted my allegiance to Great Taste. But by that time, Coach, I think you were with. Were you still with Great Taste '84? I don't think.
Alaska.
You were with
I had to sit out 84 because
San Miguel and then Great Taste, right?
San Miguel, then Alaska, right?
84.
I had to sit out 84 because of the height limit.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Height limit. And I don't think we would have won in 81 anyway. Because if I remember correctly, Toyota and CRISPR, they were powerhouses in 1980.
They were still there. They were
still the 2 teams that couldn't be stopped. And they were the teams you had to really deal with if you wanted to try to win a championship. But I did have a lot of success against those 2 teams when I first arrived. But we were not able to win any type of championship. We made it to the quarterfinals for the first time in the playoffs. And for the first time, Teflon actually beat Toyota.
Yeah.
It was unbelievable because I remember the next day it was like early Christmas for Teflon. That's how big of a deal it was. We actually beat Toyota in 1981.
But you hardly had problems. You played well against everybody when you first came, Coach. I mean, for your first 5 or 6 years, you played well against everybody. But I have a question. If you had a choice to have certain Filipino players, local players as your teammates, you can name 3 who never were your teammates, but you would have wished to play with them. Who would they be?
Well, I probably would have asked to play with the guys that had to guard me, so I wouldn't have to go up against them anymore, like Chito Lozaga and Abby King and Philip Cesar. They were 3 of the better defenders back in those days. They normally were assigned to guard me whenever we went up against them. Number 1 would be Sonny Jaworski. I would have loved to play with Sonny. You know, I had this little, it wasn't something that we'd ever talked about, but it got to the point where if Sonny was within 2 or 3 feet of me, I was trying to hit him already because I knew if he ran past me, he was going to hit me. And, my whole thing was, I'm going to hit first before I get hit because I know this guy's going to hit me. He's going to take the ball out of bounds and bump into me. He's going to do something to rile me up. But I really wish I could have played with him. That would have definitely have been a pleasure. The other guy was Francis Arnaiz. I was always amazed.
One of my favorites.
I was always amazed by Francis Arnaiz. I couldn't believe how a 5'10" guard could come through the lane and shoot a finger roll from the foul line and consistently beat it. I couldn't believe that. I mean, I just thought he was very, very talented for his size, and he could easily get to the basket anytime he wanted. He was almost like a Johnny Abrientos before Johnny came along. The other guy I probably would have wanted to play with just because he just had so much confidence, and I just couldn't understand where that confidence would come from, was Atoy Ko.
Yes.
Atoy was the type of player that would be out on a fast break, nobody in front of him, then he would stop from the foul line and take a foul shot.
Right.
Jump shot and make it. Okay, and then you just say to yourself, what is wrong with this guy? He had a wide open layup. He stops at the foul line, takes a jump shot from the foul line, and smiles at everybody.
Did you want to go all the way?
I mean, some of these guys had personality, they had character, and you could understand why the PBA was so popular back in those days.
My question now, Coach, is that after your days as an import were over in '85, you actually started coaching already as a playing coach for the San Miguel franchise. Then you somehow wound up becoming a broadcaster. And here's a name here's a term you probably haven't heard in decades. The Burlington halftime show.
Basketball.
How did that come about?
Basketball tips.
Burlington basketball.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Well, I did some guesting, I think, maybe back as early as maybe 83, 84, on the telecast as one of the guest analysts. And I actually wrote the scripts for the anchorman and the analysts for games.
You didn't know that.
Because in 1984, I did not play. And Bobong Velez, who was our boss back in those days, he was the one who actually said, hey, would you want to work with the telecast? We can bring you on sometimes as a guest analyst, and we can also give you some work in the office if you want. So I was writing the scripts for Opetada and Pingoy Pinson and Waka.
Well, we didn't know that. That's amazing.
Well, I went to school for English broadcasting, so it was some kind of in my major, how I grew up in my education. But I really enjoyed it. I mean, I loved being a part of the telecast. And then all of a sudden, a sponsor came along, Burlington Socks, and they wanted to do some type of halftime show where they could obviously advertise their socks, but it was a teaching type program where you teach any type of dribbling, passing, shooting, whatever it may be, rebounding. You would teach that type of skill, and it only lasted for 5 minutes during the halftime. Then it went down to 3 minutes, but at the same time, it's something that I became well known for around the Philippines, because I think people knew me more for that than they did for my basketball ability.
That's not true, but yeah, that became very popular.
Combination, okay? Combination.
The basketball tips were definitely something to look forward. You'd stay on the air at halftime just to watch the basketball tips, and that's something we try to do.
I used to have people come up to me and go, I'm Norman Black for Burlington basketball tips. I mean, out of the clear blue sky, they would just say that to me. I mean, it's something that they definitely remember.
My brother and I used to.
I have a confession to make. When I was in high school, my high school classmates videotaped me, and I was imitating you. And
Ventura basketball tips.
Yeah. My lesson that time was bench warming. You know,
how to look cool on the bench.
Yeah, how to look cool on the bench. You know, I'm still looking for that videotape. If I find it, I'm going to send it to you.
Coach Norman, my last question to you as a player, actually. You won the Mr. 100%, the first one to ever receive that award. But I talked to some of the players that you went up against during that time. The only thing that's not 100% about Norman Black is his free throw shooting.
Yeah,
that was an issue for you when you were playing. Talk about that.
I was never really a great free throw shooter. And I always felt it was a little bit because I started playing so late. I didn't start playing basketball till I was 15 years old. And everything I learned on the playground. So I never really learned how to shoot a set shot. I learned how to shoot a jump shot. If you remember how I played, I used to just jump on every shot, try to shoot over you and shoot it in your face. But you learn that in the playground. I mean, most young kids, when they start out at age 5, 6, 7, 8, they start off with set shots. But with me, I learned very late, and I thought that was to my disadvantage. There were some years I actually shot well in college. One year I shot over 80%. Even one year here in the Philippines, I shot over 80%. But the majority of the time, I was 66, 67%. The only advantage I had was I shot a lot of foul shots.
Yes.
I averaged about 12 a game, so I fouled a lot. So I ended up making 8 anyway, 8 out of 12 or 9 out of 12, whatever it may be. But that was never my strength. My strength since high school was always my ability to rebound the basketball.
Yeah.
I was always a good rebounder. I was a leading rebounder in high school, leading rebounder in college. And when I first came to the Philippines, I think my first year, I probably averaged about 24 rebounds a game. And that was always my strength. So I always tell people, and that's not to downgrade anybody or anything, but I was a good player, but I wasn't a great player. I had my weaknesses. I had my faults.
Sure could have fooled us.
Yeah. Coach, you had the chance to play against and maybe with, because I think they were on your team at one point. Both of them. I'm talking about Gidab and Ramon Fernandez. So these guys have been swapped for each other twice or thrice in their PBA careers. They were always touted as the two best centers. How do you compare these two players, Gidab and Fernandez? Their differences, their similarities?
Well, I had a lot of success with both of them. I won 2 championships I won one championship in 1988 with Abid Gudabin, and of course we won in 1987 with Bobby Parks. He was our import at that time. So I won a couple of championships with Abid, and I was actually a little bit shocked that Mr. Nono Ibaseta, who was the manager of the, actually he was the board of governor of the San Miguel team back in those days. He came to me and said, we have a possible trade, Abid for Mon Fernandez. And anybody who knows my story with Mon Fernandez knows that we had quite a few battles over the years. And this was already 1988, and I came here to the Philippines in 1981. So we had been battling each other and hitting each other and calling each other names for so many years. Mon was actually a player coach for Pure Foods at that time, and I was a player coach for San Miguel. And we were winning with Abid. We just won a championship with me as an import. And Bobby Parks, the conference before, and then the 88 first conference, we won with me, and Abid was part of that team too. And all of a sudden, we're going to trade Abid Gudabin. How can you possibly do that? But Mr. Ibaseta thought that was a good idea, that we do that. He thought, over the long run, it would be better for the team. I know that Abid was having some issues with his contract, and we decided to make that trade, and we pushed through with that trade. Abid was one of the best big men ever to play in the PBA. I mean, he was just great. I mean, he could play offense, he could play defense, he could block shots. He was a good foul shooter for a big guy, and it was hard to trade him. But in Mon Fernandez, it speaks for itself. Mon Fernandez, in my mind, is, and I hope all the Jumar Fajardo fans don't. In my mind, he's the best player ever to play in the PBA. And I say that mainly because I'm always into production. Now, I know Jumar has been very productive, and Jumar is great, by the way. I coached against him in college. I know how good he is. But Mon has led the league in scoring, rebounding, assists, steals, blocks, you name it. He's led the league in it. He holds the record for most championships of any player in the PBA. So until Jumar can, maybe accomplish all those things.
I don't think he'll get any objections here, not in this group.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Mon came in for us in that third conference of 1988. And we actually played against him in the second conference, all Filipino. Like I said, Mon was a player coach. And, I didn't know really what to think about Mon because we had been battling so many years. He had called me some names that I can't repeat right now, but we called each other names over the years. But when I met him in practice for the first time, I sat down with him and I told him, I know we've had our differences, we've had our battles, but hey, let's just go out and try to win games. To my surprise, he said, okay, coach, let's get it done. Let's go out and get it done. And the thing that shocked me most about Mon Fernandez is, the elegant shot, Kili shot, the El Presidente shot. He had all these different type of shots that had names for them. He actually practiced those shots. It wasn't like it was just happening in the game. This guy was a hard worker in practice. He got on the court and he practiced his skills. That's why he was as good as he was. And, we went on to win maybe the next, maybe 7 out of 9 championships, something like that with him. We went on to win the Grand Slam. We won that third conference where I actually played as an import. I actually played with Mon Fernandez for one conference, and we beat Shell in the finals. And he turned out to be a great teammate. And we had a lot of success with him. So both guys are very, very good. I would give the edge to Mon mainly because he was more productive, but Abid was a hell of a player. He was a good player.
Okay, my last question for this session, Coach, because we have to end this session because there's 4 minutes left, and we have to just log in again. I'll send you the new password. But my last question is, 1989, if you don't have Mon Fernandez, do you still win the Grand Slam?
That's a good question. Could we have won with Abbott Goodabin? Who knows? Maybe we could have. But certainly, you know, he just brought so many skills to the table. I mean, he could not only score the ball, he could rebound the ball, he could block shots, he could assist just like he was the point guard. He could bring the ball up the court whenever the other team was pressuring my guards. I mean, he was just a multi-talented player who probably pushed us over the top. So, you know, you think about it, you got to give a lot of credit to Nuno Ibaseta because that was a pretty good trade he made.
Yeah, Coach, I think a lot of young people now don't realize just how good Mon and Abbott were. I've been watching the PBA Rush, their games on PBA Rush the past couple of weeks, and the way they brought up the ball, dribbled, and
Goodabin was so imposing.
They were really ahead of their time. Would you agree? They could still play in this era and still excel. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think I could still play if I was in this era. So why not them? I mean, like in my case, you know, I was a pretty good player in the States. I didn't just become good when I got to the Philippines. So, you know, why would I not be able to do it today? Maybe I would have been bigger, stronger. Guys today, they're more into weightlifting. They eat, you know, better. They eat better food. They have personal trainers. Well, if I was in today, I would have all those things also, the advantages that the players have today. But there's no question in my mind, talent is talent. And Mon Fernandez and Abbott Goodabin were very talented players, and they could definitely play today. And they would be bigger and they would be stronger. Because a lot of people say, well, look how thin they were. They weren't. Well, let Mon Fernandez hit you a couple of times, and you'll find out how strong he was. Think back in those days, how Mon played against those NBA teams when they came to the Philippines.
Right.
He played really, really well. It wasn't like his size had any detriment at all as far as his ability to go up against those guys. So why would he not be able to do it today? Like I said, he just probably would be a little bit bigger because he probably would lift more weights. He probably would eat a little bit better. Probably get a little bit more sleep.
And Coach, you know, people tend to underestimate, and I think the younger guys don't understand how smart this guy was.
Oh yeah,
Mon just had it.
Yeah,
and everything.
You don't have to convince me.
Yeah. I'm just, it's more like I want the younger guys. It's the younger guys we're trying to convince. You know, a lot of the guys that we actually, our colleagues, the younger commentators and everything, they can't understand this thing that we have for Mon Fernandez and a lot of the other guys back then, because they never saw these guys play.
Do you realize some people even question how good was Michael Jordan?
Wow.
Think about that. I mean, if anybody who grew up with
YouTube now.
Anybody who grew up with Michael Jordan would say, "Are you serious?" I mean, Julius Irving. They question how good he was. I mean,
no doubt.
You know, everything's relative. You know, if you were great then, you could be great today.
Noel, you said you're going to ask about some game stuff.
Yeah, well, actually, you said you always wanted to play with Sonny Jaworski, but you ended up being his first assistant in the first ever all-PBA team that went to the Asian Games in 1990. What was that experience like? And what was that like winning the silver medal for your now adopted country, the Philippines?
Well, that was a great experience for me. Like I said, I had some wars with Sonny, but I always respected him as a player because he always played hard. And more so than ability, I always respected guys who go out and gave their best every game. I always felt like for the fans, that's pretty much all they really want. They want to see that you'll go out and kill yourself on the court whenever you're out there playing in front of them. That's why they pay their money to watch the games. And I felt that was one of the reasons why Sonny became so popular, because of the way he played every single game. He would go out and give everything he had on the basketball court, and you could never feel like you were shortchanged after watching him play. Okay, you may not like him, you may love him. Of course, there was a hate-love relationship with Sonny over the years with the fans, but you had to respect the way he played. And that was a good experience for me. Reno Salazar was also part of that coaching staff back in 1990 when we went to Beijing, China. I had to live with those guys for 3 weeks in the Dominion. Sonny was an amazing person because Sonny actually brought dumbbells on the trip with him so he could lift weights every day in the room. Who does that, right? But Sonny Jaworski, he had to do his little routine every day of his weight lifting and then his sit-ups and his push-ups. That's something he just had to do. So I learned to respect them a great deal. It was very tough circumstances as far as I was concerned because we put the team together very quickly. And, you know, we flew to Beijing, China to play, but we didn't know what we were up against, but to play a very powerful Chinese team. And even though we got the silver medal, it was a little bit hollow because, you know, we lost by large amounts against the Chinese team. But it's something I'm still proud of. It's one of the best finishes we've ever had in the Asian Games, getting that silver medal. And it was my first year as part of the national team. And I told myself after that I would always be available whenever the national team would need my services. So I think I've served the national team maybe about 8 months since then.
And then in 1994, you were at the helm.
Yeah, that was heartbreaking. I mean, just totally heartbreaking for me and for the team for that matter. It was one of those situations where what a difficult job. Putting a team together pretty much 2 weeks before the tournament, having some of the players not even arrive to join the team until we were there in Hiroshima, Japan, because some of them were still playing in the playoffs here in the PBA. And that was tough. And then to get to that last second where we could get that bronze medal, and one of our best foul shooters ever, Albert Patrimonio, misses the 2 foul shots, and we lose the game. We end up coming in 4th place. So that's life. I mean, it happens like that sometimes. But once again, it was a good experience. Was a little upset with the Japanese organizers then, because even in the game before the championship, not the championship, but the battle for 3rd place, the bus driver got lost. And we drove around for about an hour and a half, not being able to find the gym right before we're playing Japan for 3rd place.
Wow. Magic stuff, huh?
And I always said to myself,
you know how that happens, Coach. We remember.
I couldn't hear you.
You remember what happened to us in 2015, right? In Changsha.
Yeah.
Oh, Changsha was the same thing. I mean, the bus driver actually rode up the wrong side of the street in an 8-lane street, you know. So we were going to die. But this was really interesting because we had no problems getting to the game the entire tournament. Then the game we were going to play the Japanese team for 3rd. All of a sudden, it takes us an hour and a half to get to the arena. And that wasn't a great experience. I was always saying to myself, once the Japanese get to the Philippines, we should try something like that with them. But, you know, with our traffic the way it is, there's no way you can do that. Because you're going to be in traffic for an hour and a half anyway, no matter what.
Well, there's one anecdote I remember because in 1997-98, you were actually the head coach of Pop Cola alongside L. Francis Chua, who was your longtime deputy as well. With I believe you were with him in Santa Lucia as well. But there was one game, I don't know if you gentlemen remember this, in 1998, Norman Black had to play as an import for one game. Otherwise, the PBA would fine Pop Cola because their import, I don't know what happened to your import there, Coach. You fill in the blanks on this one, but you played in 1998 for one game as an import under Coach L. Francis Chua for Pop Cola. Tell us about that experience.
Our import, his name escapes me right now, and probably because of what he did. But he said he had to go home.
Chose to forget.
He said he had to go home back to Australia because he had a custody case for his kid. And we had a break of about a week. So he said he had to go home just to handle the custody case. He would be right back. And we said yes. We allowed him to go. And he was a pretty good kid. He played pretty well for us. So we were playing for 3rd place. So, you know, he did pretty well in the tournament. And then he didn't come back. He never came back to the Philippines. So all of a sudden, I think they were going to fine us 300,000 pesos for not having an import or something. And at that time, even though I was old already, the management under Elmer Yanga asked me if I would be able to play one game. And I said yes to it. And after the game, I wish I had said no, but I played anyway. I think I ended up getting maybe, 10 or 12 points and 15 rebounds or something. And we ended up beating Shell for 3rd place. That was against Ronnie Masanoff and Chris Jackson and Benji Paras. But I've never told this story before. I'll tell it now. I could actually still play a little bit back in those days, even though I was 39 years old. But at the same time, I was no longer a player. You know, I wasn't playing on a regular basis. but I could still jump. So in warm-ups, I figured I'd show off a little bit. I go up and I do a 360 dunk, and I come down, slam it really hard. I'm really proud of myself, and then I hit the floor, and something happened. I felt something in my knee, and I said, oh, my gosh, what have I just done? Just showing off out here. I just ruined my whole return to basketball because I was never the same player the entire game. I got through the game. After the game, my knee swelled up on me, and I just said to myself, this is it. I will never come back and play in the PBA again. It's way beyond me already. But I actually hurt myself in warm-ups in that game. You can believe that.
I actually did that game, so I remember very clearly because from first quarter to third quarter, I was just telling Norman Black stories the whole time until the fourth quarter came around, because now it gives you the opportunity, hey, you know, I can look back at this guy's 17-year PBA career as a player over 3 quarters. Thank you for giving me that opportunity to become a Norman Black biographer for at least one game.
And, you know, that was a good thing for me because if we had lost, I would have asked myself, even up to now, why did I play? It was just a good thing.
And you won in a close game too, so that was good. At least you pulled it out.
Yes, that's right.
Yes. Well, you've coached throughout a couple of generations of players already. I mean, several generations of players already. So you've seen how the game has evolved, Coach. If the imports and the players of the 80s and early 90s played in today's game, you know, no illegal defense, different kinds of defenses, they call the touch fouls now and all this and that, how different would it be for them, for you guys?
Well, I know as an import, it would be a little bit different because you weren't allowed to play illegal defense when I first came to the Philippines.
Yeah.
So what they used to do was just double team you right away. So players like myself and Billy Ray and Lou Massey and some of the other guys who scored a lot of points, we got double teamed every time we touched the ball. I think we probably would have a little bit more freedom now because now it's more of a zone defense, and we would probably be able to at least engage our men individually before we pick up the extra player. Because before, the player would be there as soon as you receive the ball. So you're double teamed as soon as you receive it already. So that would be a big difference as far as how the game would be played defensively. I always believe it doesn't really matter what era it is. You will adjust. In other words, the fact that we now have zone defense basically is what we can play defensively. You would adjust to that. Offensively, you would adjust to that. You may have to become a better perimeter shooter because you're not going to be able to get to the basket as much as you could before if you were being guarded one-on-one. But at the same time, you'll just adjust to the game. That's what it's all about. Quality players will adjust. That's why I always say the players that played before, Mon Fernandez would adjust to this game. He would not have any choice. But his talent will always shine and will always come out.
That's good.
Coach, I have a question about Santa Lucia. When you first won your championship with Santa Lucia, Chris Tan hit the winning basket. How did that complete your circle as from player coach, and now you see Chris Tan emerging as a hero?
Yes, it's interesting over the years. I mean, you know, Chris was my son, my stepson. He is my stepson, by the way. And, you know, I've actually coached players, and I've coached their sons. I mean, Bobby Parks, Ray Parks, Bong Ravenna, Keeper Ravenna. In the case of Chris, he's my stepson, he hit a shot that was just probably my biggest shot at Santa Lucia. I mean, they won us a championship against my old team, San Miguel. And now I remember when I first joined Santa Lucia, if I can tell this story real quick, I met with Danny Espiritu, well-known agent, even though he still looks like he's in his 40s or his 30s.
You're right.
He's actually been around for a long, long time. And Buddy Encarnado. And I remember Buddy asking me, all I really want you to do, if you can, is just win a championship for the franchise, which was Santa Lucia. So that was a great moment, not just the fact that we won the championship, but the fact that my son made the shot to beat San Miguel for that championship series. And that was just a great experience. X.C. Robles was a great boss, and I was so happy for him that he could actually get that first championship. And you look back on those things, and those are proud moments that you've gone through in your career. And you guys are bringing all these moments back now. I don't think about these things very often anymore.
We're the right group to bring it all back, right?
Yeah, because with Santa Lucia, the year before, we actually played San Miguel in the championship. We lost to them. We had Ansu Cisse, who was the best import, as our import, and we actually lost to them 4-2. And then the following year, we played them again in the championship, and this time around, we win the championship. So that was a great experience for me. I mean, it's with San Miguel, we were winning championship with one team, but now all of a sudden I transferred to another team and I was able to win a championship with a brand new team. So that was a good experience for me and good accomplishment.
Coach, I asked this question of Coach Jong last week, and I'm going to ask it to you now. Who was the toughest coach you had to go up against in the PBA?
Oh, is there any question? Tim Cone. He's the one I've been losing to the last 3
That's what Coach Jong also said.
He's the one winning all the championships. He's the one with 22, isn't it? 22 championships. And
counting.
It's interesting about coaching, though, because you also have to be a little bit lucky. Oh, speaking of John Chico, John was my assistant coach also, right?
Yes.
Hired John in his first job in the PBA. A lot of people think he first worked for Ron Jacobs. He was under me. I was the one that brought him from, I think it was Zobel, LaSalle Zobel.
High school.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
There, and he joined me with the San Miguel coaching staff. And the reason why I did that is because he actually played for me back in the old PADL. He was the captain of the Magnolia team with Derek.
Right.
And I remembered him as being a leader and a guy who had a great character, and we brought him in for that. When it comes to coaching, there are a lot of guys who are really talented, but they don't really get the breaks as far as the players are concerned. Because no matter what you say, and no matter how great a coach you think you are, if you don't have players, you ain't winning. Because I know as a player, once the game starts, the coach doesn't have too much to do with that game anymore. It's how many points I'm going to score, how many rebounds I'm going to grab, how many assists I'm going to get, how many blocks I'm going to get. The players on the court are going to decide the game. The coaches make big decisions. They substitute, they call plays. They do their thing also. It's their job. But the players are the ones that actually go out there and win the games for you. The coaches take the blame. The players win the games. That's what it comes down to as far as I'm concerned. In college, when I coached at Ateneo, I always thought Leo Austria was a great coach. And I think Leo might have beat me one time in college. And we coached against each other maybe 5 or 6 years in college. So I saw him a lot at Adamson. But all of our games were a struggle. He would put on like 1-2-2 press and 2-2-1 press and half-court press, full-court press. His offense was always elaborate. It's not like today where he just throws the ball to Jumar and everybody. Back at Adamson, he had all kinds of plays, that he had to study for and be prepared for. He was a good coach in college, but he just never had the players to go along with it. You see what is happening now now that he has the players. He's winning games. So in the case of Tim, myself, and some of the other coaches, Yang Gao, we've been a little bit lucky too that we've coached really good players. Yeah, we probably have skills as a coach, but at the same time, the players are the ones that are getting us over the hump and giving us that recognition as being good coaches. And I truly believe that. I mean, that's why I always have respect, not just for guys who win championships, but for guys who have teams that probably aren't as talented, but they still have some success. Joe Leeper would be a perfect example of that. He could always take an average team and make them good. I know if you guys agree with me or not, but I always
– I agree. We're from UP.
We're all from UP.
Okay. Never had the greatest talent, but he was always able to get the best out of the talent that he had.
And then, finally, Coach, we want just one last question. Could you name the 5 greatest players you've ever coached?
Wow, that's hard. You're gonna
top of the head.
One of them just
the quickest 5 names that come into your head.
Well, number one, Mon Fernandez. Even though the time that I coached Mon, you know, he was a little bit older already, but he was still great as a player. Ricky Brown, probably the most productive player I've ever coached. I mean, he could just put the points and the assists on the board for you, and you add in a few steals to help. He was a really, really good player. Hector Kama, and he may not have the statistics of some of the other players.
There you go.
But
just made Charlie very happy.
This is the story I always tell about Hector. If I can, we have a moment here.
Okay.
Hector was the most quiet guy you ever want to meet. He didn't really say too much. He didn't really talk a lot. And he wasn't the type of player that you could really, like an Alvin Ting, I could say anything to him during practice, and Alvin would just say, okay, coach, okay, coach. You know, Hector, you couldn't do that to. You'd be better off pulling Hector to the side and telling him individually what you wanted to tell him and not yell at him and things like that. But once he got on the basketball court, and I think all of the players that played with us during those great years at San Miguel back in the 80s and 90s will tell you this. We knew who the boss was on the court. Hector Kama was the boss. When he told you to do something, you better do it. He had some fire in him that would say, I am the – and maybe it was a little bit because I always used to tell him, you are the coach on the floor. If something goes wrong, I'm going to look at you first. So he maintained organization on that basketball court. And when people looked at him, they knew he was going to lead them, and they knew if he told you to do something, hey, just do it. If I'm the smallest player on the court, just do it. I'm telling you to do it, just get it done. And that's the type of respect he had from the players. So Hector would definitely be one of those. I'm a little bit guard heavy. I would go with Otto Augustine. I'm sorry. I mean, Otto was just a great player. I don't think he gets enough. I guess he does get a lot of credit because he was part of the first top 25 players of all time. But I'll tell you this story real quick. I played against Otto in this all-star game, okay? And it was a game of the PABL players versus San Miguel. Okay, the players who were coming from the NCC squad and going to the PBA already. And we went up against this all-star team from the PABL. And Otto just killed us. He just lit us up. I mean, I knew immediately this guy was going to be a star. And I was so lucky, very similar to how I think I'm very lucky with Bon Quinto right now with the Meralco team. Because we actually chose Bobby Jose as our first-round pick.
Yeah, I remember.
And we chose Otto Augustine in the second round. And it was pretty obvious, particularly when Ricky Brown and Hector started having their injuries, that Otto Augustine was going to be the star of our team. He's one of the greatest. I always say Bon Quinto is probably one of the best second-round picks ever. Well, Otto Augustine probably is the best second-round pick ever in the history of the PBA. The fact that he went on to become the MVP of the league would tell you something like that. Then I have to get one more. You're saying guys that I played with or guys that I coached? You might be a little bit shocked about this one. And I'm going to do this because I'm trying to form a team here. Can I have 6 guys? If I can have 6, I'm better off.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'll take Sam Boylan just because of his impact on the game and the fact that he was our fast break. You know, him and Elmer Reyes were our fast breaks. And the last player I would take, and this is a guy that you might, you know, I coached Marlo Aquino. I coached Dennis Espino. I've actually coached Nelson Aceitono, Nick Velasco, Ali Peak. I've coached some really, really good players, big guys over the years. But I was really in love with Ibis Dignidise. You know, Ibis had my back. Because remember, when Ibis was there, I was still a player. And if I didn't guard the other import, Ibis was the one guarding him. He had my back. He wasn't going to put the points on the board like some of these other players, but he could defend anybody. And that's one of the reasons why he was a mainstay in the national team during those 1980 runs and towards the beginning of 1990. So, yeah, those would be some of the guys I would choose. I'm sure I'm missing somebody. You know,
the San Miguel All-Stars. Talk about the San Miguel All-Stars.
I was about to say, all the players you picked were your players from the late 80s and early 90s run with
the Grand Slam practically.
Remember also Coach Alan Kayedik, huh?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it's a lot of guys. Alan.
And you did play with Boggs, right? You played with Boggs Adornado in Alaska.
I played with Boggs, but I never coached him. Yes. Yeah.
All right. I know that was supposed to be the last question, but we had a recent development, and I just want to get your thoughts on Ranidel De Ocampo, hanging them up already right now. He's a surefire Hall of Famer one of these days. Talk about your relationship with Ranidel and his impact in the game.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Coach, were you surprised that he made that announcement yesterday?
Yeah.
Well, I didn't know when he was going to make the announcement, but he had already informed myself and Paulo Trillo back at the beginning of the year that there was a possibility this could happen. That's why he was not part of our lineup going into the season. And we know, at least the people within the team know, that Ranidel's been having problems with health issues and also with injuries. And he's been toying around with this idea because, of course, you know, he's had a long, storied career, better than most. And he's got to worry about his health too, because eventually we do get old and we don't want to have arthritis or knee replacements or hip replacements as we get older. So in his case, I did know a little bit about it, but I did not know that he would announce it yesterday or 2 days ago. I did not know that. He did not inform me of that. And, you know, I've been with Ranidel a long time. I've won 4 championships with Ranidel, 3 under Coach Chut Reyes, where I was consultant for the team, or basically an assistant coach under Chut. And of course, once when I was the head coach of the Talking Tex team. And he's probably the best stretch forward we've ever seen. You know, the only one I think can come close, but I don't know whether I can put him in that category because he didn't really shoot a lot of threes, is probably Danny Siegel. You know, Danny Siegel was a guy that could score from the perimeter. You know, he was similar to me. He wasn't a three-point shooter, but he wasn't just getting all layups either. He was taking 18-footers, 20-footers, 15-footers. And Ranidel was a guy who could really stretch the floor for you. And he kind of came along, his talent came along at the right time because it's the way the game is played now. It's the way it's played. The 4-man can stretch the floor and get out and shoot threes for you. Now, Ranidel's advantage was he was also very athletic, so he could get to the basket and score around the hoop too. He had a nice little jump hook. He could get around the hoop and score layups on you. Sometimes he could dunk on you. And he was a mainstay in the national team because of his ability to get out there and shoot threes and bring the big men out from the And on the other end, he was strong enough to be able to hold his own underneath the basket. And he was physical enough, and I would say sometimes dirty enough to not take any crap off of anybody.
Oh, so, yes.
Yeah.
He got his share of deliberate fouls over the years. There's no question about that. But I'm happy for him. Of course, we're sad to see him retire, as we all have to retire one day, right? It happens with players. This is a young man's sport when it comes to basketball players, and I think he's had a great career, something to really be proud of. I'm happy to have worked with him. I'm happy to have won 4 championships with him, and of course, I wish him the best of luck, he and his family.
Okay, Coach, we won't keep you any much longer. Thank you so much for joining us.
Amazing.
Ramni Salamat, guys. Anytime, huh?
Yeah, we
Thank you
learned so much.
We can have a part 2. More stories about
do it in the 80s. Next time we do it in Tagalog, huh?
Okay.
Pwede yan.
Taglish, walang problema. I'll send you a link.
Salamat, Coach.
To the article and the videos.
All right. Take care, guys.
All right.
Thank you, Coach. Stay safe.
All right.
Thank you, Coach.
All right, you too, Coach. See you soon.
All right.
Okay, guys.
Stay safe, everyone.
Okay, guys.